Welcome to the fourth edition of the International Banda Roundtable, organized by the Banda Working Group in the framework of the 400th year commemoration of the Banda genocide, the Banda massacre that took place in 1621. The Banda Working Group is an initiative by practitioners and academics, Beatrice Glow, Joella van Donkersgoed, Merve Tosun, Nancy Jouwe, Matthias van Rossum, Pepijn Brandon, and myself, Wim Manuhutu. We had 3 wonderful sessions in which we talked about history, archaeology, and memory. And in this session, we will talk about how Banda has inspired the arts and how Banda is also, and how arts it plays also a role in the creation and the position of public memory. And we will do so with a stellar panel, starting off with a video by Banda-based photographer and videographer Lookman A, and 2 artists, Isabelle Boon, a Dutch-based photographer, Beatrice Glow, a US-based artist, researcher, and Dr. Sadiah Boonstra, who is based in Indonesia and is a historian and curator and researcher. All have worked on Banda in their different capacities. And we will start off with the video that Mr. Lookman A made.
Banda Neira. Not so many people knew about the existence of the island. Hidden in the vast Banda Sea, it seemed even more isolated. However, these islands actually became a charm on the equator that has tempted various tribes and nations to fight over them. For more than 1.5 millennium, these islands have kept bits and pieces of history scattered along the Silk Roads and spice routes. And during that period, nutmeg and maize played an important role in the course of world history. Welcome to Banda Neira, a name with 1,000 stories. Since thousands of years ago, these islands have become one of the areas that were influential in the Asian trade route. The main commodity was nutmeg, which is an endemic plant in the Banda Islands. The nutmeg tree grew only in Banda Islands and nowhere else. Nutmeg is certainly not a sweet fruit. It tastes sour and tangy. But the seed and maize have a distinctive aroma and have made them the prima donna of the ancient trade. Nutmeg and maize are used in herbal medicines, food preservatives, and cosmetics. Nutmeg contains an essential compound called myristicin, which is used as an antibiotic to prevent cancer and liver disease. It is known that nutmeg began to be traded in the 5th century AD by Chinese traders. Before arriving at the port of Guangzhou, China, nutmeg was previously traded at the port of Malacca. From Malacca, then it was taken to Goa, Calcutta, and Malabar in India, and then from Malabar to Muscat, Oman, and ended at the Constantinople market in Turkey. From Turkey, nutmeg then spread to Europe. Due to complicated trade routes, when nutmeg arrived in some place, its name changed. In the Middle East, they called it Malabar nuts because they thought the nutmeg comes from Malabar, India. And when the nutmeg arrived in Europe, they called it nut muscat or muscat, which means nuts from Muscat because they thought the nutmeg came from Muscat, Oman. The secret finally revealed. Banda Neira is the place where nutmeg tree grows, and this revelation became a tragedy for its inhabitants. And this tragedy is something that has changed Banda Neira in the course of world history to the present time. The major event that changed the history of Banda Neira to this day is Banda Mort 1621, or better known as Banda Berdarah, Bloody Banda, which was carried out by the Governor-General of the Dutch East India Company or VOC, Jan Pieterszoon. The main purpose was to monopolize the spices, especially nutmeg and mace, under the control of the Dutch VOC, and also to eliminate the English as their main competitor. The Banda Mort incident took place on May 8, 1621, in front of the Fort Nassau, where 44 orang kaya or the leaders of Bandanese people were executed. Their bodies were mutilated and their heads were impaled on bamboo poles. Besides the massacre of 44 orang kaya, Kun also killed around 6,000 people, forced to exile 789 people to Batavia. 1,700 people fled to Banda Eli on K Islands, Seram Island, and other places, and not more than 1,000 people remained and managed to escape to I and Run Island to seek protection from the English. This tragic event that Kun carried out has made Banda lose 60% of its people from the total of 14,000 inhabitants, and which became known as Onotan Sarawanda. It is said that the massacre of the Banda people was an unofficial order from the Heren 17 in 1615, which stated that in order to successfully colonize the Banda Islands and control the spice trade, they must kill all the leaders so that the remaining inhabitants would have no leader nor power to fight back. By killing the Bandanese, Jan Pieterszoon achieved his goal, and Heren 17 in Amsterdam rewarded him with 3,000 guilders for conquering Banda. Therefore, the name of Jan Pieterszoon together with Heren 17 and the Dutch VOC have been stained by the blood of Banda massacre victims. On the other hand, this genocide paid off for the Dutch VOC. From the sale of nutmeg and mace, they got more than 300 times profit that was used to build the city of Amsterdam and Hoorn, and that has given significant wealth to the Netherlands. As a result of the 1621 Banda Mort incident, the Dutch VOC then has full control of almost the entire Banda Islands and monopolized the nutmeg and mace, except Run Island, which was still under English authority. The 1621 Banda Mort did not somehow involve the killing of Chinese and Arab traders who had already settled there long before the incident and developed their culture. After successfully conquering the Banda Islands in 1621, the Dutch VOC agreed to end the long war against the English. On July 31, 1667, the Treaty of Breda was signed and brought peace to both nations with several agreements. One of the agreements was that the English could retain its power in New Amsterdam in America's Manhattan Island, in exchange for the Run Island in Banda Islands, which was under the English authority, to be handed over to the Dutch. This agreement was approved, and the Dutch VOC freely controlled the entire Banda Islands and made it the capital city, Provincie van Banda. The silence after 1621 Banda Mort actually grew VOC shareholders' enthusiasm for managing the nutmeg plantations in Banda. These plantations were not well maintained due to worker shortage. To overcome this issue, the Dutch VOC then brought in slaves, contract workers, and rebels against the VOC from various regions in Indonesia. Most of them were from Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and of Chinese, Indian, and Arab ethnicities. As immigrants in Banda Islands, these workers from various nations and ethnicities slowly merged into Bandanese society. The diverse culture and tradition they brought were integrated with the existing Bandanese culture, and this resulted in Banda acculturation. Banda acculturation is most prominently seen in their Cakalele dance and Kora-Kora boat. Cakalele is a typical Maluku war dance, but over time has been influenced by various cultures and has formed a unique acculturation in Banda Neira. The costumes, flags, symbols, and ornaments used by the performers are a combination of patterns and colors from various ethnic groups who have lived in Banda Neira. For example, the hats of the Cakalele dancers came from the Portuguese troops. There were also those who wore turbans tied with cendrawasih or the birds of paradise, while some dancers wear batik, which is a typical Javanese culture, or Indian Gujarat cloth, and the weapons used are typical Maluku weapons such as machetes, salawaku or shields, and spears. Kora-Kora is a boat rowed by a number of people and is commonly used as sea transportation in Banda and North Maluku regions. The patterns seen in Kora-Kora boats are also influenced by various cultures, including Chinese, Javanese, and Arab. During the Dutch VOC period in Maluku, Kora-Kora was used as Hongi shipping fleet to control the spice production. The Dutch VOC then built Banda Neira as a cosmopolitan city and a miniature of 17th century Europe with such impressive buildings: the VOC General Governor's Office and residence, government offices, Dutch houses, school, dance hall, church, prison, court office, city planning, and proper water drains. From 1624 to 1940, about 8,000 people of various ethnicities from Sumatra, Java, Kalimantan, Chinese, Indian, and Arab ethnics were brought to Banda Neira. They gave birth to new generations that are well-mannered, polite, cheerful, friendly, and value the heritage from their ancestors. These generations do not differentiate each other by their ethnicity, religion, and social status. For them, all Bandanese are the same. During this era, many cross-ethnic cultures also emerged. For example, play and wayang performances from Java, kuda sasak from Sunda, the bus from Banten, sawat, which is a mixture of Malay, Sundanese, Javanese, and Maluku cultures, the Mauludan culture originally from Banten, Hadrat, which was popularized by Malay with Islamic lyrics, and also various kinds of traditional games brought by the prisoners, slaves, and contract workers in Banda Neira. In addition to the culture, Bandanese culinary also has a unique character. Also, the original Bandanese language is slowly being replaced by a new language with dialect that is a mixture of Dutch, English, Portuguese, Chinese, Arabic, Malay, and Javanese dialects. This dialect has become a particular identity for the people of Banda, and which distinguished them from the other migrants. It has been 400 years since the Banda Mort incident, the most horrible, sad, inhuman event in history, but it is the starting point of a more pluralistic Bandanese society with its rich and unique culture. A culture that does not talk about ethnicity, that is anti-racist, and live by the values of Pancasila, the 5 principles, Indonesia's core ideology. The time when Indonesia's first Vice President Bung Hatta was exiled in Banda Neira. From the year 1936 to 1942, he once stated that Banda Neira is a mini version of Indonesia. All ethnicities and nations are there, merging and living within its people. We are the people of Banda, us who lost our indigenous identity, native language, social status, and never bring up racism, but proudly call ourselves Indonesians. Banda Neira, the beginning of Indonesian history.
I'm not sure how you have watched the video, but I was immediately struck by this very strong urge to want to travel and return to Banda and to visit all the islands. And Pa Lookman, who is with us today, if I may ask, and if you have perhaps one or two brief questions because of time, Pa Lookman, if I may kick off, when you made this video, what I found striking is that one of the messages of your video is that Bandanese identity is multi-ethnic, it's dynamic, it's inclusive. Is this something that all Bandanese feel proud of? And did you hear my question perhaps, or perhaps you are still muted? Jadi dalam videonya, yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. The message of the video. Hello everyone. Thank you so much to watching my video. Thank you. I just want to show the message of the video because I know after 400, after genocide, today the Bandanese is not talk about the ethnics because everyone in Banda have a many background, ethnicity in the family. So we lost the ethnicity, yeah, and we lost the native language because like my great-grandpa or my great-grandma is they talk about, okay, we are the Bandanese. We don't talk about our clan because when we arrived first time in Banda, we are slaves, rebels on the something here. So it's not, it's like, don't talk about your social status here because you still work in the Natna plantation. Yeah, so it's the make a declaration like in 1993 is after Banda interdiving, the make a declaration is to talk, we are the Bandanese. We lost the native language, so we use the Banda language now is the mix from the Dutch, English, Javas, and Malay, and the another place in the world. So it's important after the genocide. Is Banda is a transformation to a new acculturation. Yeah, it's like very unique. The acculturation is very unique in Maluku because it's mixed with the all of the clan in the worldwide. It's like the Chinese, Arabic, India, Malay, Javas, Celebes, Borneo, and the local in Maluku is mixed together with a new acculturation.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this additional clarification, and obviously there's many things to say when it comes to Bandanese identity, especially when it comes to the relationship, and we talked about this in our previous session with the Bandanese diaspora, for instance, on the Kai Islands, right, or on Iseram, or in other places. But thank you for bringing out this message in your video, and perhaps we have the opportunity for one question before we have to move on. Is there perhaps anyone who would like to pose a question, either, or perhaps you want to still savor on the images that we saw, and then perhaps later in the program we can, if we enter into the conversation, we can have questions on the video still.
Yeah, of course.
But, okay.
Yeah, of course. Tentu.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Terima kasih. So let us then move on to our next speaker, and she's Rotterdam-based, Isabelle Boon, a photographer. And if you go to her beautiful website, you see the whole range of her work. But if I'm reading what Isabelle says about her own work, is that she is interested in people, and especially in looks at details, very small details that are telling. And what she also does a lot is to work as much as possible with daylight, so natural light, and that really comes through in through her work. And when we talk about her work in Indonesia in general and in Maluku and Banda in particular, one of her works was Heritage in Transition, a wonderful exhibition that was exhibited in Kota Tua in Jakarta, and later on also in the Netherlands. It has been transformed also in a beautiful book. But what Isabelle will be talking about is her project, I Love Banda. And you are the best person to tell us all about this project, Isabelle. So you have the floor and you have the screen.
Okay, thank you, Wim, for this nice introduction. So I will share the screen first. Right. So, does everybody can, yeah, so you can share, you can see it, okay. All right, welcome everybody and thank you for this invitation for the Banda Roundtable. My name is Isabelle Boon, documentary photographer. In this presentation, I will tell you a bit about my project, I Love Banda, about being young on Banda of today. I've tried to offer a different view on the islands by putting more focus on the young generation. In this way, I've tried to add an extra contemporary layer to the prevailing image of Banda. The result is a visual story captured in a book in which you can unlock 10 videos by scanning QR codes. This project would not be possible without the support and effort of many people, in Banda of course, but also in the Netherlands. So thanks all who helped me to realize this project. I would really love to say that first. So in 2015, I worked in Jakarta and Semarang on a project about the impact of the reuse of colonial heritage. Wim also mentioned that. And during that period, I met the director of the Coral Triangle Center. She told me the Banda Islands are part of the reef protection program and that the Dutch influence on the landscape is still very much present. So that was actually the first time that I learned about Banda and its history. So out of curiosity, I went there without realizing this visit would be the start of a new project. So once there, I was actually quite overwhelmed to see how the physical heritage dominated the landscape. The many fortresses, cannons on the street and along the football fields, the Dutch church, greystones, the houses. Everywhere I looked, I saw things that referred to a time of Dutch oppression. But I also noticed other influences, such as a Chinese temple and a Chinese cemetery, and a Portuguese helmet during a Chacoleta performance. But what struck me the most were the large numbers of young people and children playing, exercising, making music, just hanging around in a para-para, flirting, being young. So as I learned more about Banda, I noticed that there are all kinds of developments going on that influence the future of Banda. Discussion about restoring the physical heritage, the UNESCO nomination, further developments of tourism, and plans of a larger airport. But I noticed that it was mainly policymakers and experts who were talking, and that the opinion of the youth hardly plays a role in this. So therefore I decided to do a project and to let the young people come into the fore. I wanted to show what it's like to grow up on this so-called shared heritage, how the young generation look at their own future and the future of the islands, and what connection they have with the past and the heritage, but also what life means in such an isolated location for their identity, ambition, and their sense of community. So I was questioning myself, do they want to stay in the islands or rather live somewhere else? And I started my research. After my first visit, I've made 4 more trips in a period of 2.5 years, in which I followed 6 young people. The common thread of the project are the experiences, activities, dreams, and ideas of Megavani, Kadis, Ulfa, Ode, Nabila, and Yellow. Through the personal stories of these young people, I've tried to shift the perspective from distant and historical to close by and contemporary. For this story, I chose the coming of age years, in which young people start to make their own choices, grow ambition, and form an opinion about their own environment and background. I also aim for a broad reflection of the ratio of boys and girls, Muslim and Christian, and different islands. So how did I approach this project? To get in touch with young people, I organized photography workshops at several schools, make frequent contact, and step-by-step build a network. For example, during a workshop that Joella van Donkershoed organized in Rumah Budaya, I met student Ode. During the workshop, history students cleaned the museum and the collection. In the following workshop, they wrote visitors' information and decided how the collection would be presented. I noticed Ode's passionate attitude, and I asked him if he would be willing to participate in the Isle of Banda project. And more than the average youngster, Ode knows a lot about this Banda's past. He often visits heritage sites with fellow students and his teacher to learn about the history of what has taken place. And Ode said to me, I find the colonizers' misconduct very bad, especially that education was only for the elite. So that is actually what he's also said is in his spare time, he likes to visit these places with his friends because the view is beautiful and you can be yourself because there are no parents around. Another person I portrayed is a young woman named Ulfa. One day she just stepped up to me and she asked me if she could practice her English with me. Her aim was to become an English teacher. She told me, teachers are real heroes. If you can teach a lot of students, the number of people who can benefit from your knowledge and wisdom is infinite. This was in 2017. Today, Ulfa is studying English in Jakarta. So every time I visit Banda, I was only there for a couple of weeks. But in order to create a documentary story, it's very important to invest in relationships. So this means taking time, joining them on trips, meeting their parents, another family, joining them to work and school. But also read non-verbal communication and respect boundaries. And sometimes I was even allowed to stay in the room when they went to sleep. Meanwhile, in the Netherlands, I kept in touch through social media, and I still do, with all the 6 of them. Because for me, collaboration, sincere connections, reciprocity, so meanwhile, in the Netherlands, I kept in touch through social media, and I still do. So for me, collaboration, sincere connections, and reciprocity are very important in everything I do. So, and with the help of my Indonesian friends in the Netherlands, I interviewed each young person a number of times. Because the challenge was mainly to get past the desirable answers. For example, to the question, what would you like to achieve in the next few years? The first answer was always, make my parents happy. So to get past the desirable answers, I created interview forms in Bahasa Indonesia. And in addition, I hired a local interpreter and introduced a card game named Koneksi. What I always do is show the images I make and also make prints and share them with the people I portray. To see the first reaction is really fantastic, actually. They're really happy. And it's an effort, and it takes time, but it's worth it to come back every time. And I think it's a nice and respectful thing to do. The results, because of the isolated location and also the layering of the story, I decided to turn it into a multimedia project. Besides photography and interviews, I recorded audio, videos, 360 and drone videos. The result became the Isle of Banda book, which combines personal stories with cultural events as immaterial heritage. My last trip in 2019 was all about sharing the result. I was able to hand over a copy of the book to all 6 young people portrayed. And together with the teacher and students from the Hatta Sjahrir College, I was able to realize an exhibition. Afterwards, the people portrayed received the photographs from the exhibition. I've had just made this somewhat tropical proof. So preparation for the exhibition in the Netherlands are currently in full swing. From May to November this year, Isle of Banda will be in display at the National Maritime Museum in Amsterdam. For the exhibition, the museum chose to use the book as a guideline, and therefore also choose a contemporary and personal story about Banda, which I think is awesome. And the success of this project largely depends on the people who have committed themselves with heart and mind. Some of them acted as a sounding board, others have made great efforts in a more practical way. This created a network of very committed people with all kinds of expertise. And I'm also very grateful for the support of sponsors, including 132 crowdfunders. So thank you everyone to support the project. And thank you to you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Isabelle, for a wonderful presentation and wonderful images that you shared, and also by telling us of your participatory approach to this project. Now, we will have the opportunity to ask questions as we have all the presentations and we enter into the conversation. So now, if you have any questions, please do not forget them. Perhaps even put them in the chat and we will revisit them later. But now we would like to move on to another amazing artist. She's an artist researcher, actually, originally New York based, now situated in Singapore on a fellowship by Yale and the National University of Singapore. Beatrice Glow has been doing amazing multidisciplinary work, especially focusing on public history and aiming for, and I'll quote from her website now, a just future. And in the past, she has earned many accolades, fellowships with prestigious institutions such as New York University, the Smack Mellon Studio program artist, and some of her work has touched upon fragrances, on colonial commodities ranging from all over the world. But she has also focused on Banda, and her work, both in all kinds of material, has been, well, spectacular to say the least, in a good way. And I've had the pleasure of seeing some of her work during exhibitions, and this is why I very enthusiastically, Beatrice, give you the floor and the screen, obviously.
Thank you so much, Wim, for that very, very warm introduction. Thank you so much to Isabelle and also Pak Lookman, our friends in the Banda working group, and so many great people that could turn out tonight. Thank you, everyone else. I can't wait to speak with Sadiah. Good evening. My name is Beatrice Glow. Can you hear my voice? It's not muffled. Give me a thumbs up. Yeah. Okay. I am so grateful once again to share space tonight with a community that cares so deeply about Banda, as well as many people who have been a part of my amazing journey in learning about the art of solidarity. As Vin said, I am an artist researcher. I work in the service of public history and just futures. I think of my work as leveraging interactive multimedia experiences to tell important stories to shift the dominant narrative. Through the stories of oceanic trade circulations, I've come to understand that while I was born in Turtle Island, also known as North America, and have made New York City my home for the past 17 years from California, my roots are tied to the migrations along the maritime Silk Road, as well as the mountains and coasts of Austronesian Southeast and Western Taiwan. So since 2013, I have been using the social history of plants as a storytelling vignettes about the entangled realities of dispossession, enslavement, migrations, and extractive economies. I think with plants to bring forth intertwined histories of othering and extraction. In 2016, I interviewed in a shopping mall in Santiago, Chile, with an installation called Aromerica Parfumeur, that was a facade of a perfume boutique that delved into the extractive histories of botanical expeditions and trade. I wanted to know, what does colonial commerce smell like? Were Magellan, Hudson, Columbus, Raffles, Coon great explorers or spice hunters? What is the allure of tobacco, pepper, cacao, cinnamon that brought people to travel far distances across oceans and also motivated countless atrocities? Of the many spice root tales I dove into, the story of El Picante, as a play on El Dorado, nutmegs and cloves, held my attention. Along my journey to situate myself as a diasporic person between Asia, Oceania, and the Americas while living in New York, I was very surprised when I came upon a book where I learned about the Treaty of Breda, wherein in 1667, as this group knows well, the road map was redrawn when the Dutch East India Company traded the island of Hatta for English colony of Rune in Indonesia's Banda island archipelago. In an attempt to monopolize the nutmeg trade, Suriname, let's not forget, was also swapped in that process. This exchange over spices precipitated change that set in motion unstoppable waves of displacements, migrations, and laid the groundwork for the economic systems that shape our lives till today. I also learned that the Austronesians also settled in the Banda Islands. I became obsessed as the shared histories of these two islands would tie New York to Austronesia, forming other connections across our global archipelago. I was so moved, and I made digital prints on silk featuring nutmeg and cloves. I like spices. These pieces also circulated from New York to Santiago, Chile, as well as Jakarta and Banda, Neira, thanks to the many people who have supported this work, including late Ibu Tanya Alwi, Wim Manuhutu, and Sadiah Boonstra. I also made a sculptural and olfactory installation titled Manhattan Tea Room, wherein bloody Delftware references history. This was first installed at Wave Hill Public Garden and Culture Center in 2015 in the Bronx, New York, and later traveled onwards to other islands like Honolulu to activate trade in oceanic flows. This installation space was imbued with scents from the spice trade: peppery, nutmegs, cloves, and cinnamon notes. It smelled like commerce. I started sourcing and layering on archival images depicting atrocities along the spice trade. Materials and objects carry history, so I asked, if they could speak, what would they say? Would it tell us about the 400 years ago in 1621 that the Dutch East India Company annihilated about 15,000 Bandanese for nutmegs? As this group knows well, the Bandanese massacre was the world's first genocide led by a multinational company, the Dutch East India Company. It took place in 1621 in Fort Nassau, shown on the left of this image. Researching on Fort Nassau led to the realization that it is the same shape as Fort Amsterdam of Lower Manhattan in this map from 1676, which was another massacre site waged against the Lunapao, the original peoples of the Estoril region that New York City is part of today. The Bandanese massacres set a precedent of genocidal policies that the Dutch West India Company, also founded in 1621, carried out in the Western Hemisphere. So I asked how it is that two islands that were exchanged for each other were both dominated and marked by star-shaped forts. What are these visually revealing patterns of exploitation? Today, on top of the foundations of Fort Amsterdam sits the U.S. Customs House that now houses the Smithsonian National Museum of American Indian in Lower Manhattan. Paintings of former Dutch colonies still hang in that room. In the U.S. Customs House Rotunda, Frescoes still celebrate European explorers like Vespucci, Magellan, Hudson, and Columbus. Like Koen, who is still celebrated in Jakarta's History Museum, as well as the street names throughout the Netherlands. These star-shaped forts are often markers of trauma. They can be spotted from Ghana, Indonesia, to New York, to Taiwan. I learned that Fort Zeelandia in Taiwan, my ancestral homeland, was built by enslaved Bandanese around 1623 following the genocide. During the 16th to 19th centuries, these star-shaped forts populated the world wherever Dutch, Portuguese, and English traders and military forces prevailed. These bastion forts doubled as trading posts and spice warehouses. This is Fort Belgica in the Banda Islands of present Indonesia. This is Fort Jay on Governor's Island, New York City, that was formerly called Nut Island, or chestnuts, not nutmegs. Fort McHenry in Baltimore, the star fort that is referenced in the American national anthem, Star Spangled Banner. I suspect the Pentagon took architectural cues from the star forts, as well as a shopping mall in Shanghai. While using a drone to film star forts in Banda, I saw that their forms echoed each other. The star, a celestial divine symbol, had became a death bomb from the sky. However, filming the story with a drone, it changed the meaning and flipped the killer machine into an anti-colonial envisioning tool. Coming back to layering the shared histories and heritages of Manhattan and Banda, I wondered if I could create a project that can fold within all these histories of dispossession, colonial violence, enslavement, forced migrations, and extraction, and our distorted relationship to our living world. While Manhattan was a backwater trading post, Roon was a Covita spice island 7 times smaller, shown here in pink. Yet today, one is a finance capital, while another has become quite obscure. The late Ibu Tanya Alwi, the daughter of Orang Kaya Desawi, shared with me this proclamation from 2005 where the New York City mayor, Mayor Bloomberg, recognized a historic relationship with Indonesia. Yet how far and deep does acknowledgement go? To find out more, in 2017, during the 350-year anniversary of the Treaty of Breda, I was supported by the Asian Pacific American Institute at New York University and traveled to Banda with my spouse, Alexandre Fado. And we wanted to meet culture and knowledge bearers and to see if they cared to connect with New York and the Lunapao people. One of the highlights of the trip was a journey on this small catamaran from Banda Neira, the main island of the archipelago, to Roon, the island that Hatta was exchanged for. We weathered a storm on the open and rocky Banda Sea. Luckily, we made it to Roon and were welcome to stay at the home of Pak Abdullah, the father of Sabdullah Bey, the school director in Roon. This is Roon, the most far-flung of Banda Islands, and it was England's first colony. We were warmly welcomed by Sabtu, so I wanted to just share that warmth with you quickly.
Hello, welcome to Manhattan Island, Roon. It's nice place, beautiful island, smile of the people, yeah? Beautiful coral in the sea, and many fish, okay?
Makasih.
Yeah.
For sake of time, I will skip, but I can share the link if who's interested in seeing more. So I shared with some young people in Roon this image by ecologist Dr. Eric Sanderson that digitally reconstructs New York in 1609, moments prior to Dutch arrival, and the juxtaposition against the New York skyline of 2008. And that there were many Lunapao settlements in Manhattan since time immemorial, as shown here in the yellow lines. The Bandanese were very surprised about the lesser-known histories in New York and joked, "Let's swap our islands again." I admire how the resilient Bandanese choose joy and unity in the face of this difficult history. But I want to also share a video of poet and journalist Rudy Folfied, who traces his roots to Kay Islands and Banda.
Oh, Banda. Banda, oh. Duka Banda adalah duka pala. Luka Neira, luka ai, Run, luka lontor, nailaka. Letusan gunung Alifuru, letusan fuli merah, lahar biru. Duka Banda adalah duka rakyat jelata, duka sempe-sempe. Ketika berkah rampa-rampa jadi kutuk. Orang-orang kaya dimiskinkan demi kemuliaan Nassau dan Belgika. Duka Banda adalah retak tempurung, pala mandul, cengke mati, gadis, dan hongi dengan 1000 kora-kora adalah suangki satu benua. Tidak punya haru, hanya santet. Tidak punya malu, hanya sihir. Oh, Banda, cukup sudah. Mari petik lagi buah-buah pala, elus fuli sampai merah. Jemur lagi biji-biji sampai hitam mengkilap. Lalu susun sampai tinggi melebihi gunung api. Biar saja pada saatnya gunung pala meletus, mengalirkan kenangan dan imajinasi tentang satu angkatan baru datang dari seluruh penjuru pulau. Anak-anak Wandan, cucu-cucu Boy Ratan, mengibarkan bendera di atas Nassau dan Belgika, supaya takkan ada lagi banjir darah dan lahar air mata di bumi Banda. Ambon, 3 Maret 2017.
Inspired by the many culture bearers that I got to meet, I often think about the importance of building global kinship and sharing with one of my teachers, the Hatta Chief Vrije herb dancer Caesar of the Matinecock Nation. He had a message for Banda.
Queen Willow One. That's greetings to all my relations. Queen Willow One, Banda. We say, in the Lenape people, we say, La Peach Canal. Until we meet again.
He offered a gift of sacred Native American tobacco for the Bandanese to initiate a familial exchange. Joella of the Banda Working Group helped me deliver the special gift to Banda. This exchange of tobacco nutmegs was small yet significant.
Terima kasih pada Vrije yang mana hadiah kita sudah terima. Jadi mudah-mudahan satu waktu kita akan ketemu dengan Vrije. Okay.
On the eve of May 8, 2021, the 400-year anniversary date of the Bandanese genocide, I am in Singapore, and due to pandemic travel restrictions, I'm on an island that is so far yet so close to Banda, as well as Taiwan. This is a proposal image I made in 2017 for Portal to connect the Bandanese and the Lunapa with the full body video chat technologies of shared studios. While this Zoom session that we are part of is not quite what I envisioned for 2021, but yes, it's quite close, so my dream has in a way come true tonight. My job as an artist is to wield the emotional resonance of art making to unroll coloniality through unpacking the history as a path towards collective healing and re-rolled just futures to building kinship and regenerative narratives. The vision of the Manhattan Portal is not only about remembering the treaties that first connected the communities, but also about honoring our shared stories in between extreme ends of the world to transcend pain and build platforms for joy and resilience, as the Bandanese do so beautifully in the past sessions I've gotten to listen to strengthen the foundations of our cultural fabric that will carry us through our collective survival and face the challenges of climate justice as we build a public commons of understanding to break the vicious cycles of extraction. All islands are connected underwater. All of our lineages are intertwined in the global archipelago. In a time of polarization and extremism, we can only exit this binary loop by thinking relationally, intersectionally, expansively, and empathetically. Terima kasih, Banda, and the many, many friends that I've met along the way and will continue to meet for your teachings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beatrice, for this wonderful presentation connecting many parts of the world and also bringing in this notion of indigeneity that transcends continents and oceans even, and focusing on water. And I'm sure there will be many questions. But before we come to that, I would like to give the floor to someone who actually also works a lot with artists, many artists, from the standpoint of a curator. She is a historian and took her PhD from the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, the university that both Pepijn Brandon, another member of the working group, and myself are now associated with. Dr. Sadiah Boonstra is a researcher and a curator and is now living in Indonesia, in Jakarta, and both in the Netherlands as well as in Indonesia. She has curated many interesting and wonderful exhibitions. And I had the pleasure, as Beatrice mentioned already, in 2017 to work with Sadiah on an exhibition regarding the Banda Islands and the Treaty of Breda, an exhibition that both featured in the Erasmus House in Jakarta and the Galerie Nasional in Jakarta, and very importantly also on Banda itself. And she recently curated an important exhibition in Amsterdam on botanical gardens and their implications. And so now again, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to you, Sadiah.
Thank you so much, Wim, for this wonderful introduction. And I would also very much like to thank the whole team behind this roundtable series for inviting me to speak here today. And thank you, Lookman, Isabelle, and Beatrice for your wonderful presentations. It's been such a pleasure to hear more about your work and to actually finally virtually meet you tonight. So that's really wonderful, and I look forward to our discussion later. Yeah, so as Wim already explained, I come from a background as a historian and as a curator. And I would like to mention also that basically my training is as a museum curator. So in the past, I have worked with colonial collections in, for example, the Tropen Museum, but also at the British Museum in London. And through my work also as a researcher on dynamics of heritage formation in Indonesia, I explored what the role of museums is in the dynamics of heritage formation. So a lot of my work actually deals with deconstructing colonial history and coloniality, and laying bare its structures and how it works. So it's very much about the legacies of coloniality and how they are part and parcel of today's society. And for me, it's important to do so because I believe that if we rewrite those colonial histories, we will create a more equal future. But the question, of course, is how do you tell these kinds of stories about colonial history? What are the stories that you tell as a curator or as a historian? And who gets to speak for whom in these stories? So as a curator, I think about how can I incorporate a diversity and a multiplicity of voices and perspectives and experiences. And I would like to provide a platform for that in my work. So that's why I really love to work with artists. And I think of artists and the role of artists and also artist activists as a way to move beyond colonial paradigms, and also as a way to reimagine history, and as well as other related disciplines such as art history, anthropology, and cultural studies, and so on. So these are a few projects that I've worked on. Some of those I will talk about a bit later. So the first projects that I wanted to discuss with you are the exhibitions that I had the pleasure of curating together with today's moderator, Wim Manuhutu. And the first one that he already mentioned was at Erasmus House. So the exhibition was entitled Banda Heritage for Indonesia. And as Wim already mentioned, this took place in 2017, which was the 350th anniversary of the Treaty of Breda. So this was the occasion on which this exhibition was curated. And both this exhibition and the exhibition at Galerie Nasional were curated for Yayasan Budaya Banda Neira. which was then headed by the late Tanya Awi. I should also mention that both of these exhibitions were supported by the Ministry of Education and Culture in Jakarta, by Galerie Nationale, Erasmushuis, the Netherlands Embassy in Jakarta, as well as Dutch Culture. And for this particular exhibition that you see here, Wim and I selected a lot of archival materials, or rather actually copies thereof, in the Erasmushuis, and it was accompanied by a seminar. So we were able to do a bit larger iteration at Galerie Nationale. And for this exhibition, we worked together with a wonderful production team consisting of Wiske Sapardan and Siti Halima. And for this exhibition, we had the opportunity to create a little bit, to expand the storyline a little bit. So here I included this little picture of me standing next to Tanya, who, you know, without her, she was such a big force behind this whole project. Without her, this would never have happened at Galerie Nationale. And the exhibition was opened by the Director General, Hilma Farid, as well as the Dutch Ambassador, Rob Swartbol at the time. So for this exhibition, Wim and I really love to show a more multi-layered history of Banda, but also the legacies of that today. And what was important for us that we would include different perspectives and experiences, and for example, also show Banda as a place of exile for Muhammad Hatta and Sultan Sjahrir. So we place the historical materials in dialogue with contemporary artworks. One of the important elements that we also wanted to show was the violent past of the Banda Island. So it was not just a celebration of Banda as heritage, but we also wanted to show more the dark side of Banda's history. So these are some impressions of the space, some archival material. And this was the first work that the visitor would encounter upon entering the Galerie Nationale. So this is a work by Hanafi, an Indonesian artist, and it's entitled Nailaga and the Stones of Time. It's from 2017. So as you can see also from the dimensions, it was a really big work and really prominent in the opening space to the exhibition. And as you can see, Hanafi has a very minimalist aesthetic, but the abstract forms that he uses actually echo the natural forms of the landscape that he's depicting. So this is Hanafi's visualization of the small island of Nailaga between Banda Neira and Roon, which only appears when it's low tide. So in this painting, he captures the moment in which the sea recedes and Nailaga's white sand and stones become visible and connect Banda Island and Roon. This is a work by I. Madhavianta. It's called Treasure Island and was created in 2012. So at that time, Madhavianta was inspired for this work by a desire to recover the often overlooked historical relationships between the tiny island of Roon and the metropolis island of Manhattan. So, you know, this whole group knows this history probably much better than I do and then Madhavianta does. But for him at that time, it was really an attempt to uncover this history again. And it was a reference of the treaty of Breda as well. So that's why we decided to hang it like this. So you see Madhavianta's work next to copies of the treaties from archival material retrieved from the National Archive in The Hague. So the work is actually in contemplation of how 3.5 centuries after the Treaty of Breda, the fortunes of both of these islands as outposts of empire have diverged dramatically, and Roon has faded from global awareness, whereas Manhattan has become a metropolis. The orange and gold surfaces of these maps, they're made of buffalo skin and they're embedded with glittering mirrors and nails, as you can see. So they bring to mind the color of spices, but they're also meant to evoke an arid and barren landscape stripped of its treasures. Then we also had the wonderful Beatrice Glow, of which we just heard the more extensive story, as well as Isabelle Boon. And because of that, I won't go further into their work because we just had their wonderful presentations. But we were very happy to be able to work with you too and to show your work in the exhibition. The exhibition closed with this work by Tita Ruby, an artist from Yogyakarta. It's entitled Hallucinogenic, and it was created in 2014. So the background for this work was that Tita Ruby thought of history and the history of the Europeans coming to Indonesia for nutmeg. And this event coincided with the spread of the Renaissance in Europe, as well as the emergence of humanist thinking. And this resulted from the Enlightenment that also resulted into a glorification of knowledge. And this is in this work visualized as the book of golden luster that is held in the raised hand. The raised hand, as well as the stick, are made of burned wood. And as you can see, the oversized robe is actually made of individually gold-plated nutmegs. So here's a close-up of the work. The robe is oversized as a reference to the greatness and the luster of humanity, but also as a reference to the arrogance and danger that lies in the power of knowledge. It can become superficial, and it can become something that is based on emptiness. So the last work that I wanted to show you is in the context of a totally different exhibition. So this was an exhibition that I curated last year at for Frame Framed in Amsterdam. It was entitled On the Nature of Botanical Gardens. And for this work, for this show, I really wanted to provide a platform for Indonesian artists so that I would take out, you know, as much as possible my own voice and provide a platform for Indonesian perspectives and voices. And so I worked with 9 really amazing Indonesian artists who critically reflected on colonial power, knowledge building, and the economics of nature, and the role of botanical gardens in this, and the role of botanical gardens as a tool for empire building in Indonesia. So a really powerful work is this by Ipen Nur, a young artist from Yogyakarta as well, which is called Perken. And as you can see, this was also quite a big work. And so what are we seeing here is actually a scene that is set in one of the Perken. It's not clear on which island it is. And I think that's also not important for this work. What we immediately notice, of course, is that something is terribly wrong. The roots of the trees are heads and skulls that look like they have been chopped off. And we see other heads lying around on the ground, as well as a big knife and whole nutmegs. We see someone behind the trees on the ground. He's possibly praying. So this is Ipen Nur's reference to the mass murder committed by Yepe Kun in 1621. So that is what we're commemorating with these roundtables this year. And in my view, this really illustrated the connection between power and knowledge and the economics of nature, and the price that is paid for it by the local people. So it's also about the exploitation of nature and people during colonial times. To me, it can be viewed as a critique and a commemoration of the massacre. And I feel that, as you can see, Ipe's style is quite raw in this work, and it's being amplified by the material that she works with. So the painting is actually made on rice sacks, which gives it this kind of like raw feel, which really makes the depicted violence even more raw, urgently. And so this is basically what I wanted to share with you about my work and how Banda has been appearing in my work. And thank you for your attention, and I would be very happy to take any questions later on.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a wonderful and inspiring presentation showing that actually the Banda Islands have been, and the history of the Banda Islands have been an inspiration for many artists, also in Indonesia. It is the work by Ipe Nur that you talked about is, of course, incredibly strong. Now, we have time now for questions, for a discussion. And there were some very practical questions. So for instance, someone asked how to get your book, Isabelle, but it was answered in the chat already. And there was also a question that was also answered about the shape of the Dutch fortresses, and Beatrice gave this very extensive answer. So I would like to first off ask you, as panelists, do you have questions to one another? Perhaps to kick off our conversation. So Sadiah showed that in the Galerie Nationale exhibition, both Beatrice as well as Isabelle's work were included as an important part of the exhibition. But I am wondering, especially when we talk about exhibitions, right? We are talking often about white cubes, cities, rather than places that are considered to be marginal in many ways. And so, for instance, Beatrice, in your work, you highlight and you stress the importance of including communities, indigenous communities in your work. So how do they relate, and how do you try to engage them and give them the stage that they reserve, rather than being perhaps again the object rather than the subject in projects and works of art?
Thank you, Wim, for that question, and also thank you, Sadiah and Isabelle. I think there's a lot of ideas rolling right now, but in answering Wim, the question, I think comes back to the word allyship versus solidarity. How do we build relationships with people that we would like to support the process of storytelling? And obviously, I am not a culture bearer from either Banda nor the Lunapau. So first off, it's really building relationship, reciprocity. Those are very key, and kinship. So both sides, although more unevenly in New York, I really feel like family with a lot of Lunapau people. And in telling stories, it becomes an over-expansive linchpin of what ways in which people would like to be heard, and then listening very closely and trying to build platforms that can remove myself as much as possible. But at the same time, the more I got, that was my initial intention, but the more I got into storytelling, I realized that it's the fact that we can model the ways in which, even if you're not a culture bearer, that you can also try to relate personally as a way to bring other people who are not from the cultures also into the conversation. I think that was a really important lesson for me, that this is all shared histories. It's about these communities, but it's also about all of us and the world we live in today. So that was kind of my personal growth approach, and learning and meeting culture bearers from both sides. So it's ever evolving, and it's never finished, is what I see. But one question I do have for co-panelists and also everyone in this lovely Zoom room is, what is it beyond storytelling? What are tangible ways we can also continue to support Banda? Because I feel that we're talking about the role of public memory and art, and I'm always thinking about other ways in which activations, and we get emotional, we want to connect, and then what are the next steps we can do to really be supportive? So those are some questions that come to my mind, as always that need for that balance between tangibility and intangibility.
Thank you. Thank you for a wonderful response, and also a very, very great set of questions. And so, Isabella or Sadiah, who would like to pick up the conversation from here? Or do you all agree?
Please go ahead, Isabelle.
Well, somebody asked me in the chat if there is how do you say, an exchange program for young people from the Netherlands to Banda and the other way. So I don't know. I'm not sure of that. I don't think that it exists, not yet, but it's an interesting thought. So I want to share it with the group. So maybe if we have connections or ideas or, yeah.
And perhaps it can start digitally first,
yeah,
and later develop or evolve into
yeah.
to another way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely, thank you for posing that question in the chat, and thank you for picking it up. And so that is definitely something that we could keep in our minds and see where there are possibilities. So Sadiah, what is your take?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond, I think, about what Beatrice was saying about relationships and reciprocity, kinship. And I think Isabelle also brought up this, this idea of relationships and how she also wanted to make sure that, that she would always print out the photos, etc. So I do think that that is something that it's about. This relationship is very important because if we talk about colonial history and, you know, the term that is often used is shared history, which could be, which, you know, doesn't necessarily mean that it's an equal history or that the experiences are equal. So I think that is something that is very important to keep in mind whenever we deal with, you know, telling stories about colonial history and of coloniality is, yeah, how do you do that? And as I posed the question earlier, like, you know, who gets to speak for whom? And I think that is something that is not always easy, as Beatrice also pointed out, and I'm sure that Isabelle has also experienced that, because just being aware of certain inequalities in relationships, for example, in historical relationships, or, you know, even contemporary relationships, how do you mitigate that? And that is something that I think we will just continue to keep learning throughout creating new works and making new exhibitions. But it's something that I'm very aware of and that I still would love to learn more about. And yeah, it's just basically about building friendships and treating each other with respect.
Thank you. And in the meanwhile, I see an interesting question coming up by Max Meyer, who asked Sadiah and Isabelle, what was the reception of your work, and was there any difference in either Indonesia or in the Netherlands? And of course, when we talk about Indonesia, we should differentiate between, I guess, Jakarta or Banda. So could you share?
Yes, of course, Wim. Thank you for the question, Max. Actually, due to the pandemic, but also the momentum of the 400 years after G.P. Koon started the massacre. So that was actually the focus point or momentum for the museum, for the exhibition, who will open in a couple of weeks from now. But for me, it was very important first to bring it back to Banda. So I showed you some slides that I made with the college of over there at Banda, Neira, the Hatta Sjahrir College, with the students and Mohammed Farid, a beautiful exhibition. And I was very curious how they responded, because not only of course the 6 young people, but also how they think and look at documentary photography. Because this is also, it was also with the photography workshop, the workshops I did, it was a purpose to show documentary photography, what it could be. So, but actually, and at the exhibition, people really understand the moments I captured and showed, because it was, of course, a selection, and because, and I think also not on the documentary photography is not that developed in Indonesia, but it's in, you see in Jakarta, there's much more attention for it, and people are a lot of interesting artists in Indonesia are working, photographers, I mean, and other artists as well. But you know, in photography, there's really a big developments going on. But at Banda, people are so in touch with their feelings. I think they really understand the images, and they're really, yeah, they loved it actually. And I was very nervous, of course, but I was very happy that they saw it and they saw the meaning of it. So yeah, that
Thank
was
you.
for me. Yeah.
Thank you. And Sadiah, how was it with your experiences both in Indonesia, but also with, for instance, Botanical Garden and in Amsterdam?
Yeah, I think, there's first of all a difference, I think, in the way of curation. Decolonizing a history means something different in the Netherlands than it does in Indonesia. It requires something different. The audiences are different. They have a different kind of background. Other, maybe they have like different knowledges about this kind of history. So what I noticed in Galerie Nationale, for example, is that, well, first of all, I think the title of the exhibition was a bit celebratory, whereas that was not necessarily the intention of the exhibition. And I think the content of the exhibition also did not actually reflect that. But the occasion of having that exhibition, especially at Galerie Nationale, was something that was received as something very positive to actually pay attention to this violent history of Banda, but at the same time also show what Banda is today and the beauty of it. And we also had some materials there from the Coral Triangle Center, for example. So it was, so in that respect, I think it was really well received. What was interesting in the Netherlands, for example, with the Botanical Gardens is I mean, it took place at Framer Framed, and Framer Framed is already a space that is a bit more alternative and critical. So that is what it's known for. So its audiences are also interested in that type of content. So what I understood is that the exhibition as a whole was pretty well received, and also because there were these strong voices of Indonesian artists that were presented in the exhibition, and each of them had a very, very strong story to tell. And the example of the work of Ipanur, that is one of those really strong voices of a young generation that is very well informed about historical colonial history, and is very well aware of these unequal power relations and basically also the cultural archive of coloniality in Indonesia today. And I feel that the younger generations, both in Indonesia and the Netherlands, are becoming very aware of that and really meet each other there. So in that sense, I think the younger generations really are getting closer together, whereas maybe the older generations, there might still be a bit of a gap in the reception of those kinds of works.
Thank you. Thank you both for these extensive and insightful answers. Beatrice, and I want to open it up a bit, because in our earlier conversations in this roundtable, we also talked about the importance of the Bandanese who got away in 1621, right? Who fled to, for instance, K, and we're happy that Pasaptu is here with us from K, because he spoke out in earlier editions very eloquently about the role that this heritage still plays. And so if you are looking for adding more layers and more complexity, I guess, to the story, how would, for instance, what Pasaptu had to say about the role and the role that the Bandanese people on Kei have in retaining and preserving the Bandanese heritage, how would that, well, quote unquote, fit in this story? And perhaps after you have responded, perhaps Pasaptu wants to join in the conversation. But first you, Beatrice.
Thank you, Wim, for that. I actually feel, I'm not sure if I should speak first. I feel I would like to invite.
Sure. Then I'll, you know, Pasaptu, you've been with us during those conversations, right? And now we have seen beautiful presentations by artists. And so do you think artists could or should also come to, for instance, Kei, in order to talk and to learn from Orang Banda, the Kei, the Banda Eli, Banda Elat, and other places, in order to be inspired? And hopefully the connection is good enough for Pasaptu to hear me.
No, it is not really good, but I kind of, you know, get some parts of what you were saying. And I reckon it is about, is it a good idea of, you know, like having artists coming in onto K to, what is it, to study more on the people who. Yeah, I think it is really important because historically these people do not have that kind of, you know, written history from their ancestor. You know, it was a situation where people fled to flee to save their souls, rather than it is not it is not like a migration or something like that. It is people just moving to save their souls. So at the time, but they actually from narrative of origin, you know, these people are still inherit, or whatever we say, stories from their ancestors, that there were a process before moving down to K. They held, their ancestor held a meeting after the massacre. You know, about 15,000 people, they left about 200 people to live. And they conducted a meeting to decide whether they stay or they leave. And at the time, I heard from Baparaja Banda Eli today, which is he's the 14th Raja, you know, 14th Raja of Banda Eli people who fled from Banda. There are their ancestor living about one or 200 people. You know, they conducted a meeting to decide to discuss among them to decide whether they stay or not. And they came up with a conclusion at the time that they've got to fled out from Banda because they would like to survive, because they don't want the Bandanese to be vanished. There should be some descendants in the future, they said at the time, that should survive to be those who can continue the generation of the Bandanese people, rather than they all vanished of the, you know, it is just like ethnic cleansing or whatever you call the genocide. So these people decided to they say, as Indonesian people say, menyelamatkan generasi. They saved the generation from the Bandanese.
Mm.
And I think if the artist can put that in a painting or something, how their situation where people are sitting together, you know, in the scary situation, under the threat of having to lose their heads, and the history of people to go by boat to come here down on to Kei Islands. And when they came to the outlying islands from Kur, and then some people are living on Kur Island from whoever you call Nene Buiratan, whose generations are some are being the Raja in the part of Kur Island, and some are continuing to the Pulau Dula, which is now by is Tual municipality, and they then continue to Kei Besar.
Yes.
You know, there is a process of the local indigenous people of Kei receiving them. There were celebrations. There were, you know, kind of, you know, yeah, celebration to receive these people, and then they accept them as part of Kei Islands. And then they moved to Kei Besar in the eastern part of Kei Besar, Utara Timur, which is eastern part of southeastern part of Kei Besar Island. And they live there as a village with their own Raja and their own community, their own Islamic leaders, and with the structures that they bring in from Banda, with the history, with the, you know, the local songs and stuff that maybe Timo has explained the other day, you know, last meeting. But I think there is a possibility. That is one thing. The second thing is that about an hour ago, a people is represent a local government officer just called me that the head of the district of Southeast Maluku, Bupati Maluku Tenggara, would like to present a speech in the front of the governor of Maluku tomorrow in Ambuan. And the Bupati would like to hear more on the history of the close relationship between the Bandanese people with the Kei Islands. I think culturally and religiously, Banda is an influencing part of Indonesia to really influence also the life of the Kei people here.
Okay.
You know, if some of these artists can put that in whatever you call, maybe it is very good for the next generation to learn or to study deeper about the relationship of Banda people and Kei people.
Thank you very much, Pasaptu. And Joella also mentioned, and you know much about this, obviously the pottery that is still recognizable as being Bandanese pottery that is being produced in Kei, right?
Yeah, that is the kind of, also like building belang or, you know, kora-kora, as Bandanese people call, and some other relations that actually are bringing in to Kei Island from Banda. Yeah, like pottery, like, yeah, many other things, like also like what they call mas Banda, which is gold. It's actually not really gold, but kind of type of traditional gold from Banda people that are also used even in Tanimbar Island as a percentage to, like, marriage, in the marriage process. They give this kind of traditional gold to, like, to ask for a woman or to get married with them, something like that.
Yeah, so kaya mas kawin, yeah. So Beatrice, if I then move to you,
mas kawin, yeah.
You hear about this resilience. You hear about this continuation of tradition. Did you see the same resilience resonate with the Lunapi people that you met and that you worked with?
Yes, thank you first off. Thank you, Pasaptu, for sharing your perspective. I'm very moved that I get to meet you in the Zoom space tonight. It brings a lot to my heart. Yes, thank you. One of my regrets when I got to visit Banda in 2017 was I didn't have enough time because of the waters, and it was a little more dangerous that I couldn't go to Kei. So I have in my dreams one day that I will be able to visit, but not because it's for me to quote again, extract a story, but to see how I can, with my way of listening deeply and trying to help document, how can I use my position as someone who has built a public platform for myself and have built connections to help create a platform to continue to support. So I think of it always as being in service of communities and listening closely. In my work with the Bandanese, well, with the Lunapao people, I really think of it as a process of continual unfolding, because how can you, how can you unpack 400 years of trauma? It's really difficult. Sorry, I'm kidding. I hear so many stories, and what I know from people is that it's always about letting stories be told, and by telling a story, there's a process of collective healing. No matter which side of history or which gradient of that history your ancestors and you yourself are on, and that we need to take all the time it takes to listen closely, and then to find ways in which that can be turned into something regenerative. Something, and in the story of the Lunapao, it's a very complicated history because there is a major some people will say diaspora, some people say forced migration, but altogether the Lunapao are separated scattered throughout North America with many, many waves of massacres and migrations that really push the family, and there continue to be difficult stories that need to be unpacked, which I am not in the position to speak about in this space, but I can only share that things do not happen on the timeline of the artist. Things happen on the timeline in which the communities need to have their stories built. So I was so grateful to hear Isabelle talk about and amplify that notion for youth. And I think what artists can do, and I was so happy to hear, is there ways in which we can share as artists doing workshops when we visit places, not to pull the story that I want to tell, but how can I share workshops and tool sets and knowledge of storytelling so young people can really tell it from their experience, their lens. And I'm a very privileged person. I get to travel and do work, but I would like that to also be for other folks, especially thinking about generations before me who didn't have this privilege I enjoy today. Sorry, I got a little emotional, but it touches my heart on many levels as I do this type of work, and in the process learning about colonial violence in my own family 400 years ago and what that means. So it's been a journey, and tonight is so special. So I also am so grateful that Paksabtu shared his story. I don't know if that kind of answers some of your
much more than we would hope for, and thank you very much for making it very personal, in the sense that it is not just a project, it is not just quote unquote art, it's much more. What I would like to do now, also looking at the clock, and even though it's even in 4 extended sessions, you cannot deal with thousands of years, because one thing we learn, which is of course incredibly important, is that the history and the presence of the Banda Islands is much more than just these 400 years, right? We've learned that through archaeology, we've learned that through the stories. But because of time, I would like to invite anyone in the room, if you have a question to one of our panelists, and let's not forget, and because he's still with us, Lookman, who made this wonderful video. And perhaps I can kick off with a small question. Lookman, if you're still there, let me just ask the question, and then we'll see whether Lookman is still has the opportunity to respond. What I wonder is how visitors to Banda actually react if they learn about this also very violent history. Lookman, there you are.
Yeah, okay, Mr. Wim.
So,
Thank you.
Pak Lookman, bagaimana kalau when people hear about the violence, how do they react?
The reaction, yeah. No, I just want to show the all. I just saw the all is my knowledge about the Bandanese, after the genocide, and maybe I hope someday we can make the big project about the Banda movie. Yeah, because it's not. It's it's 350 years. It's long time for build city and the all of in Banda, especially in Banda and Maluku. So I hope someday we can make a big project about the Banda movie with the focused story about the nutmeg and the colonialism and the all of the history. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And definitely there are so many ideas that come up out of these conversations. So I'm pretty sure that that many ideas will be shared, and bringing together a very diverse group of people in this Zoom room is of course also wonderful. So people have now had the opportunity to see your wonderful work, which is important. I'm again checking the room for one really last final question, because we are running overtime, which is good because there was so much to say, and perhaps I would like to draw your attention to an upcoming conference in Vancouver, Canada, on 6th and 7th May, Oceans as Archives, and on the 6th of May, there will be a session devoted to Banda. So Banda even travels to Vancouver, which has its own complicated history when it comes to dealing with the indigenous people of that area. But for now, as I see no questions popping up in the chat, and thank you, Pasaptu, for sharing your information in the chat. I would like to first and foremost thank our wonderful panelists, Pak Lookman, Beatrice, Sadiah, and Isabelle, on behalf of the Banda Working Group. And I think on behalf of all of us, I would like to thank all of the people who have joined us for this session and previous sessions, as I think it brought up a lot of fascinating, interesting, but also very important issues. Again, any comments, any information that you would like to share, all is welcome, and please be in touch. And let's continue the conversation, perhaps not in this room, but in many other rooms and spaces that we can find. So again, banyak terima kasih untuk semua, apalagi untuk saudara-saudari yang menonton dari Indonesia atau Asia, oleh karena sekarang sudah tengah-tengah malam, dan please enjoy your rest, and sampai jumpa until we meet again. So take care, and let's continue the conversation. Thank you very much.